was broadcasting at 5:35 a.m. by Radio Free Kossuth, Budapest on November 4th, 1956. The speaker is Prime Minister Imre Nagy. In this critical hour, we make a historical declaration. Trampling on the Warsaw Pact, the Russian hordes have launched a perfidious attack against Budapest and several other cities in the country. The battle is on in Pécs, Székesfehérvár, Dunaújváros, and Veszprém. Hungarian soldiers are fighting as one man against the invaders.
After the end of World War II in 1945, Joseph Stalin's regime absorbed Hungary, along with Poland, Romania, and other buffer states, into its rule. The expansion of the Soviet sphere of influence divided Europe into the communist East and the liberal West, which led to the bloodless conflict known as the Cold War. Under Stalin's stable leadership, Hungary's Soviet-aligned premier, Matyas Rákosi, joined the Warsaw Pact in efforts to maintain peace. However, this act subsequently crushed Hungarian freedom under Stalin's iron fist. By 1949, Rákosi's harsh administration had taken a toll on Hungarian citizens, and the first signs of radicalism bloomed into an imminent uprising. Under Stalin's influence, Rákosi endorsed the AVO, the Hungarian secret police, to censor local newspapers and root out all opposition, sending over 100,000 writers, idealists, and politicians to prison. Poor representation in government and the lack of human rights protection led to discontent. Heavy industrialization forced by Soviet steel production limited the Hungarian economy and resulted in monstrous war hysteria. For 4 years, Hungary remained in oppression until Stalin's death, which crowned Nikita Khrushchev as the new and more progressive leader of the Communist Soviet Union in 1953. During Khrushchev's rule, Hungarian political ideology started to change. Nationalism emerged as a force stronger than 1,000 tanks. Liberalism, sparked by English and French revolutions, instilled primitive ideas of free speech, open elections, transparency, and a capitalist economy among Hungarian revolutionaries, which was met with fury under Rákosi's administration. With de-Stalinization well on their way, Khrushchev loosened Soviet restrictions and the fight for liberty began to brew in Budapest. October 23, 1956. Students and workers took to the streets in a massive march, demanding radical change. While propaganda leaflets circulated like currency, the Petrofi Circle, a secret organization in defense of intellectual liberty, published 16 grievances pushing for less censorship, fair wages, and disbanding of the secret police, which prompted Rákosi to plead with the Kremlin for help. Within hours, over 1,000 Soviet troops crossed the Hungarian border, and the once peaceful protest was now a disarray of artillery rounds and shouts of wounded protesters. The Hungarian Revolution had begun. By October 24th, with Rákosi out of office and Imre Nagy appointed as the new premier, Hungary's crippling government was beginning to falter. A group of student protesters stormed a parliament building, demanding the establishment of their 16 points. Men threw homemade Molotov cocktails and nitroglycerin bombs at tanks, while women reloaded rifles amidst a group of university students. As fire scorched the streets, slogans tainted the once pristine buildings, calling out Ruski Kaza, or Russians go home. Revolutionaries also ripped apart the Hungarian tricolor, leaving a hole where the communist emblem once stood. That day, over 6,000 people gathered to demonstrate Hungarian cultural unity. They demanded Nagy's appearance to address the situation, but Nagy's response was meager. Instead of enacting new legislation, he called for a ceasefire. In retaliation, 14,000 Soviet troops, backed by the AVO, entered the heart of Budapest and slaughtered 200 protesters and wounded 75 others. During the first few days of the revolution, nationalism flourished as all Hungarians alike rose up in Budapest, and on October 28, 1956, the fire extinguished. Fighting ceased, and for 4 days, Hungary was triumphant. Soviet troops withdrew in defeat, creating the first rip in the Iron Curtain. Not only did the uprising liberate the Hungarian government, it also incited a series of social, political, and economic changes that shook the foundations of communist Europe and paved the way for a liberal victory. The fall of communism resurrected a wave of Hungarian patriotism. A new national flag boasting the emblem of Kossuth reigned as town squares resonated with the choir of a revitalized national anthem. Modern youth culture also thrived as student-led democratic unions aspired within universities. The ascent of the national media also facilitated freedom of speech. Newspaper coverage of Hungary's success circulated by the millions. People hungered for the printed word as though they had crossed the desert. Radio transmissions also changed the face of European communication. The radio-free broadcasts created by the United States provided over 35 million listeners with raw and unbiased media, which contributed significantly to the demise of the communist regimes. Workers also banded in defiance. The new revolutionary workers and student councils demanded reform by issuing leaflets encouraging nationwide strikes to urge democratization. In some towns, they even broadcasted their own messages to prevent people from sympathizing with the Soviets. Their efforts garnered further rebellion within Hungarian industrial towns not previously affiliated with the revolution.
I would say in terms of a break in communism, possibly within Hungary itself, because a lot of the people that used to be associated with the Communist Party, basically, after it was reformed by the Soviets, a lot of people didn't join that Communist Party anymore.
Outside Hungary, revolutionary movements inspired by that of 1956 fragmented Soviet balance of power. In the Czech Republic, the Prague Spring dismantled a rigid bureaucracy and gave power to socialism with a human face. Similarly, under Gomulka's leadership, Poland reconciled communist and nationalist tendencies. Even decades later, in 1989, the Romanian uprising ended the corrupt dictatorship of Nicolae Ceausescu. The Hungarian Revolution had successfully dug a liberal stronghold within the Soviet Union. Communism seemed to fade. However, liberty didn't last long. On November 4th, the Soviets returned with 150,000 troops and crushed the rebellion. Over 2,600 Hungarians, mostly young workers and students, were killed. 200,000 more fled to Austria, while others became prisoners of war. Emir Nagy was executed for treason, and a puppet government emerged under Soviet-appointed minister János Kadar. For 35 years, Hungary remained under communist rule until the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. The defeat of the 1956 revolution became one of the most tragic events in Hungarian history. Yet under Kadar's policies, Hungary experienced a miraculous period of prosperity for the first time since 1848. Kadar's goulash communist tactics relaxed government censorship, opened a free enterprise market, eliminated administrative regulation in certain business sectors, and centralized planning to increase progress. Single-party elections increased civic participation. A pragmatic rule in the late 1960s eventually raised Hungarian standards of living. The new economic mechanism eased foreign trade restrictions, incentivizing businesses to produce more goods. Industry was replaced with services, and decentralized planning introduced new taxes for revenue, while opening up trade to Western countries.
Hungary did have sort of a special position within the Soviet bloc, unlike other countries, in the sense that they were more Western prone even after the revolution. For example, the Hungarians had like a very powerful nascent electronics industry, which like a lot of countries in in Eastern Europe did not.
One of Kadar's most successful reforms was the redistribution of sizable plots and ample livestock to the peasants pushed off farms during Stalin's collectivization. His policy gave the choice for farmers to choose between collective or cooperative farming, and granted substantial government investments. By 1962, more than 95% of all farmland had been formed into state farms. As a result, Hungary became the only country with a centrally planned economy where crop output increased as a result of collectivization.
But I would say overall probably not a victory. I would say overall the revolution just showed the sheer brutality that the Soviets would be willing to again implement within their sphere of influence.
Overall, the Hungarian Revolution symbolized the insurgence of liberalism among a communist-dominated sphere and exposed the weaknesses of Eastern European politics to the world. Despite its tragic outcome, the heritage and experience of 1956 would forever change the progress of Hungary through the 20th and 21st century, serving as an invaluable weapon for a new generation of Hungarians as they move into battle to reopen the unfinished war against bureaucracy.